We used to live in a society where everyone,
And not just the men, but the women. And the children, too.
could rush the field of MLB games with virtually no consequences. Long gone are such days, but what happened? Why did the powers that be collectively choose to stop this from happening ever again? Was it one incident or several? From riot police being needed to restore order to explosions rigged in center field. Join me on this chaotically strange journey as we deep dive into the most destructively notorious occurrences and ultimately why rushing the field has become completely illegal in Major League Baseball. The earliest story we have of fans running onto the field comes to us from the 1921 World Series between the New York Giants and the New York Yankees. The Giants ended up winning the series and fans swarmed onto the Polo Grounds. The reasoning? Evidently, the fans just wanted to shake Giants manager John McGraw's hand. The earliest known video we have of an MLB instance with fans running onto the field or pitch invasion can be traced also back to the 1920s. In 2014, the Library of Congress released newly discovered footage from the 1924 World Series between the New York Giants and the Washington Senators. This is widely regarded as one of the greatest World Series of all time. It was a back-and-forth battle with narrow margins of victories from each team. This would eventually lead us to a Game 7 at the Senators' home in Griffith Stadium. The Senators would win Game 7 in the bottom of the 12th inning for their first and only World Series win during their time in Washington. The Senators were believed to be completely outmatched this series, and they almost were. The fans storming the field also appear to be doing so in just straightforward celebration. But what would happen over the next 70 years or so of baseball would have some incidences that were straight up destructive and dangerous. Now, I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that players, any personnel on the field, and MLB were not too happy with this, especially with how chaotic and destructive some of these invasions became between the 60s and 80s. With that being said, let's go over a few of the wildest incidents. Before we move forward, I'd like to take a moment to try and save you some money. Shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring. You can use promo code JabroniBaseball to get $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek is the official ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. You can use SeatGeek for sports, concerts, music festivals, Broadway shows, comedy shows, and more. Again, my viewers get $20 off their first purchase with code JabroniBaseball. That's one word, all caps. Click the link in the description to download the app. Now, we'll start with the 1969 Mets, coming into MLB as an expansion team in 1962 to replace the Giants and Dodgers leaving to California. The Mets and their fans had to endure some of the worst baseball in history from 1962 to 1968. However, as we all know now, the 69 Miracle Mets were seemingly a team of destiny. Within a span of 28 days, Shea Stadium was completely taken over 3 separate times by fans after the team won its most important 3 games in its short history. The first time was when they won the National League East, the second time was when they won the National League Pennant, and of course, the third time was when they won the World Series. It's first in franchise history to a fan base that was so desperate for National League Baseball after the Dodgers and Giants left. As you could imagine, after the World Series win, absolute mayhem ensued. Within seconds of the final out, there were hundreds, if not thousands of fans on the field. The Mets had to run into their dugouts and bullpen to escape the mayhem. Fans were reported to have been seen diving from the upper decks of Shea Stadium to join in. Fans were reported to have dug out home plate, the pitching rubber, and bases. Players said they didn't feel like they were in any imminent danger, even though fans were taking souvenirs right off them like their hats and attempted to take their gloves from them. Even after being interviewed by the press, most players laughed and said it was all very innocent behavior. But as you will soon come to find out by watching this video, this was the last time it felt as innocent as it once was. Fans were about to take things way too far, and both MLB and law enforcement would soon take much closer notice. Just 4 years later, during Game 5 of the NLCS between the Mets and Reds, it would take almost half an hour to finish the 9th inning. That's not too weird, right? Maybe they just played some good baseball, but in reality, no, the reason was not that. Fans kept trying to get through barriers set up by Shea Stadium. Many believe that these fans were incensed by a fight that broke out in Game 3 after Pete Rose slid into second baseman Bud Harrelson to break up a double play unsuccessfully. On top of that, Rose would then hit a clutch home run in Game 4, which the Mets would lose 2-1. Back to the Game 3 fight between Rose and Harrelson, both teams ran onto the field to join the fight. Once order was restored, neither Rose or Harrelson were ejected from the game. However, in the bottom half of that very inning, when Rose returned to his position in left, fans began throwing debris at him and a whiskey bottle almost hit him. Reds manager Sparky Anderson then pulled his entire team off of the field. National League president at the time, Chub Feeney, then threatened the Mets and their fans that they would forfeit the game even though they were up by 6 runs unless the Mets could calm their fans down. This led to Mets manager Yogi Berra, Tom Seaver, Willie Mays, and Cleon Jones to go to left field to tell the crowd to just please chill out. The Mets had to even post on their scoreboard that they would rather lose by playing baseball over their fans making them lose. The fans did calm down and the Mets would end up winning the game 9-2. But around the 9th inning, there were deep concerns on how fans were moving around the stands. It was reported that a lot of the younger fans had moved from the upper decks to the box seat area of Shea in order to storm the field the moment the last out was made. Tension was very high as the last out grew closer. There was a temporary seating area that collapsed from the sheer weight of fans walking down it. The home plate umpire had to tell the Mets public address announcer to tell the fans to stay off the field. There was even reports of the Reds team doctor's wife who fell down and was stepped on by fans. She was eventually escorted away in tears. It got so bad that Alex Grammas, a coach on the Reds, told the players' wives section of the stadium to leave as quickly as possible. While the wives were leaving, a fan pulled Reds Phil Gagliano's wife's hair. Phil then punched the fan in the top dugout area. There were even extra cops that came through in an attempt to restore order, and well, mayhem ensued anyway. With 2 outs in the top of the 9th inning, public enemy number 1 to Mets fans was Pete Rose, who was on first base. It was obvious to anyone watching that the moment the game was over, fans would be going after him. Everyone was concerned for Rose's safety. Vin Scully on the radio reiterated over and over how important it was for Rose to get off the field quickly and safely. Just seconds before the 3rd out was made to clinch the pennant, fans were already running onto the field. Pete Rose was quoted as saying he was thinking they could still win the game while he was on first in the 9th, but he was also scared to death because of the fans. Even though he knew he had 15 guys with bats ready to protect him, but he was never touched since he got out of there real fast. He continued to say that New York didn't deserve the pennant and they let their fans out of the zoo for the game and then took them back when it was over. He said he never felt more scared in his life. Johnny Bench was quoted as saying that their first concern was Rose's safety and they thought someone was going to kill him, and if the cops weren't going to stop these maniacs, they would. Mets fans tore the field completely apart, ripping parts of the turf, leaving huge craters on the field. The pitching rubber, bases, and sections of the outfield fence were stolen or straight up destroyed. Even Tom Seaver said he was embarrassed by the fans, saying that they didn't care about baseball or the Mets winning. They just wanted an excuse to tear up anything in sight. Reds manager Sparky Anderson was furious with the Mets, their fans, and the city of New York. He told the media that he couldn't believe they don't have better control of the people and that he was ashamed he was in this country, but he wasn't too sure if New York was in this country after this week because normal fans don't act that way. He also added that they must have been on dope or something. But make no mistake, nobody was safe from the chaos, and that includes Mets players. Willie Mays had his hat stolen by a fan, which he felt really upset about since he said it was his only cap left and he felt like it was a good luck charm. He commented that he would have rather given up his jersey as he ran towards the dugout. Tug McGraw had to fight off several fans as he held onto his cap to prevent it from being stolen too, as he ran into the right field bullpen for his safety. It's still pretty insane to think that a Major League Baseball playoff game almost ended in a forfeit because of a premature riot that ended up being a riot anyway. It's estimated that 1/3 of the sold-out crowd in attendance stormed the field that day. The next major incident happened on June 4th, 1974 at Cleveland Municipal Stadium between the Indians and the Rangers. This night is the infamous Beer Night Riot. Now, you may not know anything about this, mainly because the events of this night weren't televised. Now, what led up to this night? Well, just 6 days prior, there was a benches clearing brawl at Arlington Stadium between the same teams, which included Rangers fans throwing beer at Indians players going back to their dugout. After that game, a Cleveland reporter asked Rangers manager Billy Martin if he was going to bring his armor to Cleveland, to which Billy replied, "Nah, they won't have enough fans there to worry about it." As it turns out, there was a lot to worry about because twice the number of fans showed up than expected. Why? The Indians were doing a 10-cent beer night promotion which drew 25,134 fans. At the time, this was a huge discount because they usually cost 65 cents for a 12-ounce cup of beer. Now, there was a limit of 4 to 6 beers per transaction depending on the reported source, but there was no limit on the amount of transactions that could be made per fan throughout the game. So basically, long story short, unlimited beer for 10 cents each. Needless to say, as the game went on, fans got more and more belligerent. The Rangers took a 5-1 lead, which Indians fans probably weren't too happy about. A random woman ran into the Indians on deck circle, flashed a bunch of people, and tried to kiss an umpire. This, however, was not reported to be the kissing bandit herself, Morgana. Then there was a naked man who ran onto the field just to slide into second base. Just an inning later, a father and son ran into the outfield and mooned a bunch of fans, and then that's when things went from weird to straight up dangerous. Some fans, for whatever reason, brought firecrackers, which they started throwing onto the field and set off in the stands. As the game went on, more and more fans would run onto the field. Rangers first baseman Mike Hargrove had hot dogs thrown at him, fans were spitting at him, and he was almost hit with an empty gallon of jug wine. Fans then became more upset because LaRon Lee of the Indians spiked Fergie Jenkins at a play at third base, which caused Fergie to have to leave the game. This caused the Rangers to start yelling from the dugout at Lee, which made the Indians fans go nuts. Fans then began to throw firecrackers into the Rangers bullpen and onto the field. The demand for beer was simply too much for the stadium to handle. By the 7th inning, families and anyone who was sober had for the most part left the stadium, while the remaining crowd would get worse and worse. At some point, it was reported that Billy Martin threw crushed gravel at fans to egg them on, which probably wasn't a good idea. After 9 innings of drinking, the fans were about to reach critical mass. The Indians tied the game at 5 as a young fan ran onto the field to try to steal Rangers' Jeff Burroughs' hat while he played in the outfield. The 19-year-old fan said he dropped the hat, and as he was trying to pick it up, he saw Jeff looking at him. At that point, Jeff kicked the fan and tripped up a bit right after. Rangers manager Billy Martin, all the way in the dugout, thought Jeff was attacked, so he and the rest of the Rangers ran onto the field with some carrying bats. Well, that made things way worse because fans then stormed the field with knives, any blunt object they could find, parts of seats, and chains. It got so bad that there was at one point about 200 fans and counting surrounding the entire Rangers roster. Indians manager Ken Aspromonte told his players to grab bats and whatever they could to help the Rangers since he felt like their lives could be in danger. At one point, Mike Hargrove beat one fan in a fist fight and was immediately in another one while he ran back to the Rangers dugout. Fans then began attacking their own players by throwing folded chairs, rocks, batteries, hot dogs, popcorn buckets, and just about anything they could get their hands on. Both teams protecting each other eventually were able to retreat into the dugouts in groups. Several players were injured, including Indians pitcher Tom Hilgendorf, who was hit in the head by a steel chair. Even the umpire crew chief for the game had his head cut by a part of a stadium seat. After both teams went into the clubhouses, they locked the doors. Fans continued to destroy the field by stealing bases, tearing up the turf, and ripping up anything, again, that they could just get their hands on. Because of the chaos, the game was forfeited to the Rangers by the umpires. Crew chief Tom Chillick called the fans uncontrollable beasts and that he'd only seen this happen in a zoo. Eventually, the police were able to restore order. 9 fans were arrested. When a local Cleveland reporter tried to interview fans about what happened, he was punched twice in the face. The Indians' general manager at the time blamed the umpires for losing control of the situation, but there was really nothing stopping that night from happening. When later asked about that night, Billy Martin said that he remembered chairs flying down from the upper deck, the Indians fighting their own fans, that they were first protecting Rangers players and then they were just protecting themselves, and that it was probably the closest we'll come to seeing someone get killed in the game of baseball. Indians manager Ken Aspromonte said that he figured Martin's 25 and his 25 players could handle it, being that the people on the field were swinging like hell, but mostly missing because they didn't know where they were. In that night alone, it is estimated that the 25,134 fans drank over 60,000 cups of draft beer that game. Going back to New York on October 14th, 1976, the Yankees were hosting a bitter rival at the time, the Kansas City Royals, for a decisive Game 5 in the ALCS. It was a tie game going into the bottom of the 9th inning, and before a pitch could be thrown, Yankee fans were already throwing toilet paper and random debris onto the field, which caused a game delay. Once the game resumed, Chris Chambliss hit a walk-off home run on the first pitch thrown to send the Yankees to the World Series. At the time, this was the second time in postseason history that a series was ended with a walk-off home run. Yankee Stadium went insane as fans poured onto the field. Yankees third baseman Greg Nettles rushed to home plate to grab the home run bat from being stolen by fans, which Chambliss still has to this day. The second that ball went over the right field wall, there was an army of police officers ready for the inevitable. Before Chambliss could even reach second base, there were hundreds of fans already on the field, and one fan even tripped Chambliss rounding second base. He had to push his way through fans attempting to grab him and steal his helmet as police officers attempted to protect him. The situation was getting worse and worse, and it became clear that there was no way he was touching home plate for the home run to count. Eventually, Chambliss and the rest of the Yankees made it into the clubhouse safely, but Chambliss later went to home plate disguised in a police officer's jacket with 2 security guards and an umpire to finally touch home plate. However, they would soon discover that home plate was stolen and all that was left was a hole from where it used to be. Chambliss would touch that spot and the home run would then officially count. The very next year, Reggie Jackson cemented his nickname as Mr. October by hitting 3 home runs in the World Series clincher for the Yankees. As soon as the final out was made at Yankee Stadium, fans, not surprisingly, ran onto the field, which gave us this now legendary clip of Reggie running back to the dugout protecting his helmet and glove. If you look closely, yes, he was wearing a batting helmet while playing defense. This was because Reggie said that some fans were throwing firecrackers near him in right field and it made him nervous enough to walk off the field to grab a batting helmet to protect himself. If there was ever any question if Reggie Jackson could play another sport, he probably could have been a running back in the NFL. I mean, he absolutely hit-sticked fans trying to get back into the Yankee clubhouse. This all leads us to a July night in 1979, Disco Demolition Night. This is where the White Sox would host the Tigers in a twilight doubleheader. For those of you who have no idea what that is, this is a doubleheader where the first game starts between 4 and 5 p.m. local time, and the second game starts that same night after a short break between games. Anyway, the White Sox and Tigers were playing at good old Comiskey Park in Chicago, Illinois. A little bit of background here: in the late 1970s, disco was the most popular genre in the United States. However, its popularity in music and in media like movies really pissed off rock music fans. The White Sox were currently 40 and 46 going into the doubleheader and were having trouble filling their home stadium of Comiskey Park up. Just the night before, attendance was 15,556, where the park's capacity was 44,492. So White Sox owner thought of a great promotion, given the climate of the hatred of disco, to put on the next night. Veek partnered with a local radio shock jock named Steve Dahl, whose radio station WLUP helped to sponsor this promotion to get more fans to show up to the doubleheader. Dahl was an anti-disco campaigner. Both Dahl's fan base and rock fans who hated disco were the target audience. Now to the promotion. Any fan that would bring and turn in a disco record would be allowed into the doubleheader for just 98 cents. In addition to that, between both games of the doubleheader, all collected vinyls would then be destroyed on the field by explosion. The White Sox were hoping for maybe 20,000 fans to show up to this, but they severely underestimated how many people hated disco, I guess, because over 50,000 people showed up. The White Sox also only hired enough security to handle 35,000 people. Once capacity was reached, there was more fans sneaking in, and on top of that, the collection stations for the vinyls were at full capacity, causing fans to bring these records to their seats. On top of that, once the White Sox got word that the fans were sneaking in, they sent all of their security personnel to the stadium gates to stop them in the middle of Game 1. This left most of the stadium without security, and if we've learned anything about rowdy crowds in this video, things can go from bad to straight up dangerous pretty fast. Fans began throwing the vinyl disco records from their seats onto the field. In addition to that, they were throwing firecrackers, which seems to be a common theme. They were throwing empty liquor bottles, and again, pretty much anything that they could get their hands on. Game 1 had to be stopped a few times because fans just wouldn't stop throwing things onto the field. Tigers DH Rusty Staub recalls seeing the record sticking out of the ground, and then he had to tell his teammates to wear their batting helmets while playing defense, saying, quote, "Oh my god, all right, I've never seen anything so dangerous in my life." This now brings us to why this night is called and remembered as Disco Demolition Night. At 8:40 p.m. after Game 1, Dahl came out to the field in an Army uniform. He drove around the field in a Jeep as fans continued to throw firecrackers and empty bottles at the car, where fans were just cheering "Disco sucks." Dahl then drove to center field, where all of the collected disco records were put in a box and rigged with explosions. Now, there were two major problems as this was happening. Problem 1, security was still at the front gate, stopping any more fans from entering the park. Problem 2, security locked all of the gates but one in an attempt to stop those fans from entering the park. This was not a great idea. Why? Because the fans that were inside of the park that started to get the feeling that things were about to get out of control wanted to leave, so they were being bottlenecked into one exit that security created. Going back to Dahl in center field, he welcomed the crowd to officially the world's largest anti-disco rally. He then proceeded to blow up the box filled with disco records, and almost in an instant, an estimated 5,000 to 7,000 fans rushed onto the field. The explosion triggered by Dahl ended up causing a large hole in the outfield. Fans began destroying everything they could find. They pulled out and stole all of the bases, ripped up grass, stole the pitching rubber, destroyed a batting cage, and continued to set more and more records on fire as a massive bonfire was raging in center field. In fact, one of those fans that rushed the field was a 21-year-old Michael Clark Duncan, who said he slid into third base, had his belt buckle stolen, and took a bat from the dugout. In an effort to restore order, White Sox broadcaster Harry Carey addressed the crowd and the scoreboard display to please return to your seats. But at this point, it just wasn't happening. It was a full-blown riot. By 9:08 p.m., the Chicago Police Department arrived in full riot gear. Overall, 39 people were arrested, and there were an estimated of up to 30 injuries. Even after the grounds crew spent over an hour trying to get the field back into playing condition, Tigers manager Sparky Anderson refused to let his players play due to safety concerns and demanded that the game be forfeited. The White Sox owner wanted the teams to play the second game. The umpire crew chief for the game then had to call the American League president, who initially postponed the game. But Sparky argued that according to the rules, the game needed to be forfeited as games can only be postponed due to an act of God, and as the White Sox were the home team, it was their responsibility to have the field ready to play. The American League president Lee MacPhail agreed, and the game was forfeited by the White Sox. A little fun fact, this game remains as the last American League game to be forfeited, and Disco Demolition Night will remain as one of the most insane nights in baseball history. The last time we ever saw anything as destructive like this happen was back in New York City when the Mets clinched the NL East on September 17th, 1986. In this incident, Mets fans completely destroyed the grass in Shea Stadium. Head groundskeeper Pete Flynn said it looked like the whole field was bombed as fans were tearing up endless hands of grass to keep as souvenirs. Pete was pretty pissed at the fans, saying that they don't deserve this team and that it was vandalism, pure and simple. Just a disgrace. His crew had to work countless hours of overtime to get the field back into playing condition for the next series, and to Pete's joy, nothing like this has ever happened since in Major League Baseball. The Mets would win the World Series in '86 in dramatic fashion at home in Shea Stadium, and there was no on-field rush this time around. The moment the final out was recorded, an army of police officers and security would hug the lines of the field on horseback, and fans stayed in their seats celebrating, which would become the norm moving forward. Since then, we have had our one-offs of usually solo fans running onto the field. Strangely enough, yes, in one case, flying onto the field via parachute in the World Series, getting absolutely destroyed by security, having bones broken, teeth knocked out, and even getting tased by police officers. Although the law was always in place that it was considered trespassing if you went onto the field, theft if you took anything from the stadium or the field, and the cost of destroying anything, when you had so many people doing it, it was just impossible to apply the law to so many at once. So yeah, there you have it, the beginning and the end of rushing onto an MLB field. Odds are we will never see anything like that happen again in Major League Baseball. If breaking curses like the Cubs winning the World Series in 2016 and the Red Sox in 2004 didn't make fans consider it, certainly nothing will at this point. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me and the channel out a ton. What are your thoughts on rushing the field? Any wild stories I didn't go over on this one? Sound off in the comments below. I'll catch you in the next video. Later.